What if you found Texas's greatest fortune, but were 21 years too early? That's not a hypothetical. That's just Tuesday for a man named Lynn Taliaferro Barret. Folks called him Toll, and if you've ever pumped gas in the state of Texas, you owe this man something, even if you've never heard his name. Toll Barret was born in Appomattox, Virginia in 1832. Yeah, that Appomattox. Though the irony of that name wouldn't mean anything to anybody for another 33 years. His family pulled up stakes for Texas when he was 10, but his father didn't survive the trip. Unfortunately, that's how a lot of Texas stories start. A shallow grave somewhere along the road, and a family that just keeps going. They settled at Melrose in Nacogdoches County, deep in the piney woods of East Texas. And nearby was a place called Oil Springs, a patch of water where crude oil seeped straight up out of the ground. The Cherokee people who lived there before had used it for medicine. Settlers used it to grease their wagon axles and doctor their livestock. And little Toll Barret played in it as a boy, probably getting yelled at for coming home covered in the stuff. Most people looked at that oily water and saw a nuisance. Toll looked at it and saw something else. He just didn't know what to call it yet. By 1859, Toll was grown, married to Angelina Martha Thomas, and working as a mercantile clerk. And that same year, word came down from Pennsylvania that a man named Edwin Drake had drilled the country's first commercial oil well. Toll didn't hesitate. That December, he leased 279 acres around Oil Springs and got ready to drill. His plans would have to wait though, because in 1861, Texas seceded. Toll got an exemption to run his mother's plantation, then spent the back half of the war as a captain in the Confederate Quartermaster's Corps, keeping the Nacogdoches district supplied. Whatever else you make of those years, understand this. Toll Barret didn't ride off to glory. He counted wagons and rationed goods while his oil dreams sat in the ground, waiting. He wrote to a friend after the war, and this line tells you a whole lot about the man. The great excitement of this age is oil. This region of Texas will be wild upon the subject in a few months. He was right, mostly. He was just about a decade and a half early on the timing. The war ended in 1865, and Toll didn't waste a month. That December, he and 4 partners organized the Melrose Petroleum Oil Company. They rigged up a steam engine to turn an auger fastened to a pipe, about as basic a drilling rig as you could build, and he went to work at Oil Springs. On September 12, 1866, at 106 feet down, they struck oil. The well was named the number 1 Isaac C. Skillern, after the family who owned the land. Toll wrote back to a friend that he had found earth adhering to the auger perfectly saturated with oil. He shipped a sample up to New York, and the assayers there called it superior in all its properties. Texas's first producing oil well. Now let's let that marinate for just a second. This is 35 years before Spindletop, 35 years before Texas and oil became the same word in a lot of folks' minds. And it happened in a quiet patch of pine woods run by a Confederate quartermaster captain and 4 merchants with a homemade rig. Now, if you're new here, this story is kind of a perfect example of what Lone Star Echoes Extra is built for. The quick, strange, true stories that don't quite fill out a full episode over on the main channel, but I think they deserve telling anyway. Hit subscribe if you want more of these. Alright, let's get back to Toll. Here's the part where the story turns, because striking oil and striking it rich are 2 very different things. The well only produced about 10 barrels a day. Not nothing, but not a gusher either. And Toll had picked about the worst possible moment in Texas history to need investment capital. It was 1866. Reconstruction was strangling the state economically and politically. The nearest railroad was miles away, so there was no cheap way to move barrels to market, even if he had them. Toll traveled all the way to New York and Pennsylvania trying to find backers, trying to convince men with money that East Texas was sitting on something real. Unfortunately, nobody bit. Toll went broke chasing that well. No explosion, no scandal, no villain. Just the slow, grinding kind of broke that comes from being right too early. He gave up the oil business and went back to what he knew, the mercantile trade, back in Melrose, selling goods instead of crude. He served as justice of the peace. He was a Mason, secretary of his church. He raised 11 children with Angelina. He lived the rest of his life about 12 miles from a fortune that would eventually get made, just not by him. In 1887, the Oil Springs field finally got developed for real, with newer money and better transportation. The boom Toll Barret had predicted 20 years earlier finally arrived. and he watched it happen from the outside. Toll Barret died in Melrose in 1913, largely unknown outside Nacogdoches County, but history has a way of settling its accounts late. In 1966, exactly 100 years after that auger hit oil at 106 feet, the state dedicated memorial markers at his grave and at Stephen F. Austin State University, finally naming him what he was, the man who drilled the first producing oil well in Texas. There's no clean moral here, and we're not going to try to force one. Toll Barret wasn't a tycoon, and he wasn't a tragedy. He was a man who saw something true about his home state a full generation before anybody else was ready to believe it, and he paid the price that pioneers pay more often than you would think. The Spindletop Gusher of 1901 gets the parades. Toll Barret got a tombstone marker 53 years after the fact. So, what if you found Texas's greatest fortune 21 years too early? You go back to the store and you raise 11 children with your wife, and you wait for the history books to catch up. If you like this one, go ahead and hit those like and subscribe buttons. It helps us keep digging these stories up. Thanks for riding with us. We'll see y'all down the road.